Hello, everybody, and welcome to this evening's event at Stimula Live. I am so thrilled to have us back together again so soon from our last event. And tonight is so exciting. We are going to have Patty Palmer from Deep Space Sparkle joining us to talk with Mary GrandPré and Barb Rosenstock about their body of work. And I know that we have many art teachers with us tonight and other educators and librarians, as well as bookmakers and aspiring bookmakers, so that we can celebrate the power of, books about artists and how when we use them in the art room, we are creating a whole new generation of new artists. And so I am not going to delay, because I know you're not here for me, you're here for them. But I do want to say a quick thank you to Kidlit TV for spreading the word this evening. And here we go. I'm going to bring on Patty Palmer, who is a veteran art educator and the CEO and founder of Deep Space Sparkle, which is an enormously successful website that creates teacher resources for art educators and parents to be able to bring art education to kids. Patty.
Oh, hi. Thank you so much, Erica.
It is really a gift to have you here with us tonight. As I've said before, and I will always say, the opportunity to have bookmakers and teachers in conversation is what it's all about. And so we're enormously thankful for your time. Thank you for coming.
Oh my gosh, it is absolutely my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. It is a deep honor. I know what a dream it is for so many people to write or illustrate a children's picture book. I know it's a thrill when an educator discovers a quality picture book that they can share with their students. And it's really because of people like Barb and Mary that librarians can really fulfill their mission of putting really quality picture books in the hands of children. So this is why we're gathering tonight, is to dive a little deeper into the process, this beautiful, magical process that is creating these, in my mind, works of art that we get to share in whatever capacity that we're in with children. That's who we're ultimately trying to impact. And these books that I have all of them here. And, it's so fun because I've been using, this has been one of my favorite books for so long, because as an educator, it's very difficult to explain the life of an artist in a very condensed period of time. So I use picture books extensively in the art room and, in my business. So I'm so thrilled. And I'd love to just dive right in with a conversation with Barb and Mary. So shall we bring them on?
I'm going to bring them on.
Okay.
And I'm going to sign off, and I'm going to leave you all to it. And I will come back at the end for questions. So everybody listening, if you have questions, we will save time at the end for them. So be prepared for that. And I can't wait to listen in, ladies. Thank you all for being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Erica. Well, Barb and Mary, I tell you, this is quite a thrill to talk about things that we're clearly us, like, most passionate about this, but I know there's a ton of people watching who are equally as excited. So people, if you're watching, let us know in the chat if you're a teacher, an art teacher, an educator, a bookmaker, an aspiring writer or a writer, whatever you are, let us know. And then we can kind of tailor our questions to suit you as well. So Barb, let's just dive in. I read in something on the internet that you were a second grade teacher, and this is what inspired you to start writing. Is that true?
Yeah, well, it's kind of partially true. I was a second grade student teacher. I worked in advertising for many, many, many years, and then started reading picture books and kind of thought, wow, I think I would love to teach with these. This would be great. It kind of like the picture books came first and the idea to teach came second. I went and got my degree while my children were young, and then actually sold my first manuscript right all as that all kind of happened at once. And kids were little, and it just seemed like I should take this path. So I did. So yeah, I did I actually even got the job. I just didn't take it. Oops. But yeah.
I don't know. I kind of think you made the right choice.
Yeah.
Don't you think so, Mary? So, Mary, Mary, I tell you, you're an amazing artist. You're an amazing illustrator. I'm kind of wondering what you can't do. But a lot of you know her from the books, The Noisy Paint Box, Through the Window, and I'm going to talk about these books, but also the Harry Potter series, which is, kind of how I first, came into your universe, or you came into mine, I should say. So, where did all that start?
Well, first of all, I've been drawing since I was probably 4 or 5 years old, and I remember drawing. My first drawing was Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse, and I would draw the cartoons and the Sunday cartoons when we'd get the big colored newspapers and trace them. And I got a lot of support in my early years for drawing. So I've just been drawing forever. And in high school, I was kind of known as the artist, and I would do the murals in the high school and the library, and we did the mascot, which was a bear at the time. So animals, people, I just drew whatever I could. And by the time I was looking for college, I attended the Minneapolis College of Art and Design, and didn't really know how I wanted to apply my art out in the world. I started with design and studied logo design and type design. And I'm so glad I did, because it really helps me as an illustrator. It helps me envision how a page lays out, how a cover will come together with type. It helps me actually design my own type if I want to hand draw some things like that. But I didn't know anything about illustrating children's books really when I was in art school. I didn't study children's book illustration per se. I just studied illustration, and I started in advertising and took my portfolio from door to door, the big, 50-pound, 48 by 50 portfolio full of original work, and sat with art directors and went through my pieces and slowly built up my client list in Minneapolis, where I lived. And I then realized, I'd really love to illustrate children's books, and I'd love to tell stories, visually, and just really have fun with that. I've always loved them as a child. Why not bring them back into my life as an adult? And I sent out samples and letters to publishers, and honestly, I got quite a few rejections, and it was disheartening. And when I talked to art students, I talked to them about that. I talked to them about, it's going to take a while to build up your presence in the field, and don't be discouraged, because we all get these rejections, but it builds us. We learn from it, and we learn what we can do better. And I did. And so once I got my first children's book, it just kind of blossomed, and I was connected with more publishers. And I was very fortunate to work with some wonderful art directors and to work with some wonderful authors like Barb. So it just kind of grew.
It does grow. The path is it's never straight.
Nope.
It's always very windy. And I think that's what gives us the nuances of all of the intricacies of our work. It's a straight path is rather boring, don't you think? And
Yes.
We never really do what we set out to do, but we find and discover things along the way. So, but I'm so happy that this path led to this moment, because can we just share a little bit? I'd love to hear, like, at what point did you guys get together? Like, what came first? I know this book came first, The Noisy Paint Box, a story about Kandinsky. But was it your manuscript, Barb? Or did someone say, "Hey, we need a book about Kandinsky. Who can write it?" Or what happened?
I just find stuff kind of like an artist. I mean, kind of like a visual artist. I know Mary has, you just kind of bring things into your life. And sometimes things just fall in your lap. I don't know what I was doing, but this is an article, a very old article that is titled "The Man Who Heard His Paint Box Hiss."
Yeah.
And it is a review of a Kandinsky art show that was at the Tate Modern in London. And I wasn't looking for Kandinsky. I actually, when I read this, I went, Kandinsky, who's he exactly? Like, I am not necessarily, super educated in terms of art and artists and art history. And then as soon as, of course, I Googled Kandinsky, saw the circle paintings and went, oh yeah, Kandinsky. I always liked his work. But this is the picture that got the book started. This is Vasya at, I think, 7. And I just started to think, because he writes in his own work about hearing colors. Yeah.
He looks exactly like the picture book.
He does, kind of. I wonder how that happens. So the idea of this little boy being so just enthralled with color, and the idea that he could hear it, that literally, and I used to do this in my office when I was writing, like literally I'm like red, yellow, I would have sounds for colors to just try to bring myself into his brain. That's kind of just how it got started. And I wrote a manuscript. It was almost immediately called The Noisy Paint Box. I kept trying to call it like Vasya's Paint Box, but then all of a sudden I'm like, it's noisy. And then Mary, Mary, I don't even know, how did you get, I mean, the manuscript gets sold to a publisher, but then I don't know how you got, when you read it or how that.
Yeah. Well, I knew the art director, Isabel Warren Lynch,
right,
from other projects. She actually gave me my first children's book illustration job. She was just like a mother, tucking me under her wing and just showing me how to do this thing. She really showed me the ropes, and which was, years before your Kandinsky book came into my life. So Isabel and I had a really long relationship, and she trusted me and I trusted her, and we really loved working together. And she reached out to me. I'm not sure, she must have seen a connection between how she envisioned the kind of the look the book would have, and thought of me when she saw that in her head. So she called and sent me the manuscript, and I loved it. And actually, when that manuscript came into my life, I was investigating for myself abstract art and starting to paint abstractly myself. So it was like, oh my gosh, this is perfect. Oh, I love this. And the story and the way you told the story about this man, not just the artist, but this man who grew from this little boy who was, challenged and curious about what was going on with himself, and finding it in his paint box was pretty awesome. And so I love Barb's writing anyway. So I enjoyed it. I knew right away I wanted to illustrate it. So there are some manuscripts that come across my desk that I don't connect with. And I have to be real honest with myself, because I wouldn't do the book justice if I didn't feel a connection.
I can't imagine a more perfect union in terms of you two, because I just can't imagine this book illustrated in any other way. But sorry, go ahead, Barb.
No, I was going to say one of the things that I really appreciated about Mary's work, I mean, as soon as I saw sketches, I was like, wow, okay, that's way better than what was in my head. So there we go. But she did design a lot of the type, like even from the very beginning, Mary, I don't know if you remember, but I have sketches here.
Like the metrodome.
And like metronome, like there are words.
Oh, yeah. Metronome, right.
Where she, Mary was like already going metronome, like already like, writing it down the page. And I was like, oh, this person, this illustrator who I had never met, just understands. Like I just felt like taking care of, like Mary's brain and my brain were doing the same job from two different perspectives, which is always, so great. And I think that's really great about artist biographies too. You were talking about the path is never straight, and all these artists, their path was not straight.
Right.
For children, their path is not straight. I mean, I don't think little tiny Claude Monet or little tiny Vasya Kandinsky was going, and someday my paintings will be in a museum, not at 7 or 8. Mary GrandPré might not have been saying that. She just knew what she loved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think you just follow that. You follow your heart, and that's where you get to.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then when you do that, when you do follow that voice inside your head, oh my goodness, the magic that you guys create, because then it gets to people like me. And I read these books and I go, so this is when you're reading to a bunch of children, like the biggest gift you have as a teacher is to hold a book in your hand and to have the kids sit at your feet, like close, not putting it on a whiteboard or no, like a smart screen, but holding it in your hand and showing the children and letting them see how the author and the illustrator, they think alike. Like, how could it not be one person creating this book? That's always amazing to kids. But to read things like he sat stiff and straight at dressed up dinners while the grown-ups talked and talked and talked and talked, because that's exactly how a little kid talks. Mm-hmm. And then you get to the art. And Mary, when you create this, you basically, and the words that you use, Barb, that's basically an art lesson right there. Mm-hmm. There's like an art teacher cannot explain to a child in the way that you guys do how Kandinsky thought about color and how he thought about how it should the way it should be arranged on a piece of paper. And that's what the books do for educators. So every single one of your books, they do that. So you wrote The Noisy Paint Box, and then Through the Window came next, right?
Van Gogh came next.
Oh, it did.
Mm-hmm.
It did.
It did.
Oh.
And it's all Mary's fault. And it's all Mary's fault. Yeah.
Yes, I take blame for that.
She takes blame.
Okay, so I have a question for you, Barb. And this goes to Mary too. I'd like to have you both answer it, because, okay, I know a little bit about Vincent van Gogh. He's one of the most popular artists that we study in school. Like, children all know Vincent van Gogh. Okay, he has a very long list of paintings, and he has a very, colorful, not a very long life, but a colorful one. How do you discern, Barb, what goes into a book for children about Vincent van Gogh?
He was a difficult subject. I had something in mind. It was really important to me. I've met a lot of kids in school and have some personal experience too with people who have emotional difficulties, mental illness, whatever we want to call it. And it depends on the day. And it was really important for me that when I read Van Gogh's own writings, he was struggling and also super inspirational at the same time.
Yeah.
I think to reduce him to a man who cut off his ear, which is kind of the typical things that are said about him, was just I really felt that that's not the direction I wanted to go in at all. I wanted to show a real human being with some real struggles from the time he was little. And there are kids like that. There are adults like that. There's a lot of us out there in the world, and a lot of people who have relations like that, or, and it was just a really important topic for me. In addition to the art, was to show his feeling struggle through this whole process, and how art was able to kind of soothe him and rein him in, and how the colors soothed him, how he got a lot of, and I think that the art room, for all of you, any of you art teachers out there, I think a lot of times you do see those kids that they might be fit in the art room, but they spend a lot of time in school kind of not fitting other places. And so I really just want to thank all the art teachers, because that art room is like a safe haven for a fair amount of kids, and an important one that maybe isn't always given credit. So I guess I just didn't want to do the ear. I didn't want to do the field, but I wanted to do his emotional struggles justice in a way that a 7-year-old or an 8-year-old might be able to understand still. So And when I read that his mother called him her starry-eyed boy, it just stuck with me. You know, that is something that someone would say about a child maybe that was struggling, like, oh, honey, you're just my starry-eyed boy. You know, it just struck me that was his mama and the way she talked about him. And I think that's how it became the Starry Night. But Mary's the one who came up with the sleeping thing. Do you remember that? Mary, we met the one time we met at a breakfast. Mary came downstairs and she was working on another book and she said, I'm having such a hard time sleeping. Because she was struggling with, you know, an art problem or a painting or something. And I thought, that's weird. I wonder if all artists can't sleep. Vincent couldn't sleep either. Oh my goodness, Vincent can't sleep. That's the title of the book. So that's kind of where it went.
But it also just segues so beautifully into that later phase of his life without, you know, expressing it outright, which I think some books have. And it's just difficult for an art educator. I know we have a lot of art educators here, so I just want to say hi to Natalie and Sue, and I think Meg said she was here too. So I just want to say hi. But you guys know it's difficult to touch those subjects with little children, because we might be doing an art lesson with 8-year-olds. So how do you touch that? But I tell you, I thought the level of sophistication in which you tackled Van Gogh's later years and his death, it just was so gentle and going to sleep. Like that's the last. I just want to show everyone, like that's the last page. You know, it's like this beautiful, tranquil sea of color and star and twinkle and what children associate with Van Gogh. And it's like, shh, Vincent's asleep. And children get that. So, oh my goodness, this is just such a beautiful book and it's handled so well. I mean, I love Van Gogh's work. So, Mary, how did you choose which art pieces you're going to do? How do you do that?
Well, really, I mean, Barb did so much work with research and I researched his work, but of course I've studied him too quite a bit. It's kind of chronologically, we had to be careful about what pieces he had done at certain points. And because he's so well known, there's a lot of, you know, light on him. We need to be careful that we're just correct in our timing of everything. So I picked paintings that had fit the what was happening in the story at the time. And, you know, on the point about, you know, it's a difficult subject for children or anyone. It was actually difficult for me as an artist to this was one of the most difficult books I've done, but emotionally, because we all do have our struggles, and I think artists see the world in a different way anyway, and I think that their struggles are you know, based in the tragedy of the beauty of the world sometimes, and just not being able to fully give all the beauty that you have inside when you're looking at something and to put it on the canvas. And so that's already a struggle. But he had his own personal things. And so, you know, painting him in the hospital bed, how do I show that and not make it too depressing? And so I tried to bring the beauty of his strokes and really paid attention to how he paints to each painting and make that the focus, the dreaminess of it, the rich color, the way the strokes move, the directional movement, instead of the hospital bed. Or, you know, I had to really bring him to each piece.
Oh my gosh. Can you say all of that again? I tell you, no, when you're looking at a picture book and you're holding this up to your students, to your child, and so you're reading these beautiful words and you're setting this tone, and Barb's words help you with the pacing. Like, you don't have to even do the work. But when you're looking at the art, you just feel. The thing that you do is you feel the art. But what Mary, you're saying is how intentional it all is. And so you can see the bed is actually moving into the window, and there's no separation between the two, and he's so calm. It's almost like he's just sitting there, his arms are folded, and it's such a beautiful, serene. The kids are knowing what's happening, but it's such a beautifully. I love how you're explaining that. You're so smart.
No, I mean, Barb really just kind of sets it up for me. I mean,
Yeah.
when
It's not true. I always feel like my job is to write half of a story, exactly half, not the whole thing. And to leave a large amount of space for a person, as talented as Mary is, to really fill the emotional space and to fill, most of the description. There's not a lot of description in my writing. Most of the description comes through the illustrations. What colors is he wearing? What is out the window? I mean, I'm not really talking about that. Mary does all of that. But the things that illustrators do, and Mary does it particularly well, is just kind of those subtle things, like with the bed, that the bed in the window, and you get the impression, you do get that soothing, that what Vincent was thinking about was his art, and the art, the hospital bed couldn't bind him, like it couldn't keep him there. The art is where his brain was, and that's what gave him comfort. And Mary can do that illustration way more than I can in words.
Sometimes just one word that you put in there, Barb, like shut tight in a hospital, told to rest as dark hills wave past his window. The word wave was what made me open that window up. So just
what a hard word. I probably had 42 different words there too.
Well, it worked.
That intentionality. It was like, does it wave? And then I'm looking at the cypress trees in the starry night and saying, are those waving? Is that really waving? Are they wiggling? Like, there's all of that. Like, is that a wiggle? Is that a wave? I mean, it's kind of goofy what we do. It's very playful in a lot of ways. It's also a little.
Yeah. A wave was a serene word for this particular scene. And it really worked. And it really made me realize that's what is happening in his head and in his heart. These things aren't outside the window. They're all around.
Right. They're like saying, come out,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is interesting.
It was a challenging book for me, but when it was done, it was like, I felt like I knew him better. I felt like we were connected. So.
Yeah. Barb, when you're saying that wave was a difficult word for you to come up with, how often is it that you have a word, like how long do you deliberate? Because picture books, there's only so many words you can have in them. I mean, we got to keep them. And that's the other thing. As an art educator, we need to keep it chopped. We're like Frosty, because we don't have a half an hour to read a book.
Right. No, I know you don't. You guys have like 5 minutes and then lesson.
But every word is just so carefully placed and chosen, and that's not by accident, is it?
No. That's the job. I mean, that's the job part. That's the practice part. The way that artists have practice. That's the practice part. Is it's every single word has been gone over multiple times. Every sentence, every rhythm, everything. And then once I'm done and it goes to an editor, then someone else is also reading. And then Mary or other artists may have suggestions every once in a while, like, if this could just be this way, it may make their job a little bit easier. It may make they may have an insight that I didn't think of, and those things are really important. So that's when it becomes, like I said, before we got on, like a team sport. It really is a team between the art director, the editor, the illustrator, the author, and the other 100 or so people who touch the book before it's out in the world. It's a team. So.
Yeah. Were you going to say something, Mary?
No, it really is. And I think, and it goes back and forth too. If Barb sees something in a sketch before we go to finals, I think could be tweaked or changed, we investigate that too. So, yeah.
Well, how long do you get to write a book and to illustrate the book? And how long does this collaboration typically last? Does it take 2 years? Is it 6 months? Like what's the process? I'm scared to ask.
Barb, you start the project.
Well, I start the process, and it can take as long as it takes. I mean, unless something's contracted. Sometimes things are contracted ahead of time, and then I've got a due date. Sometimes they're not. It takes me about roughly 9 months to research something and another maybe 6 to 9 months to write it. But that can vary. But the quickest it ever is a year total. So and then Mary,
yeah, I mean, it varies on my end too. Some books are more complicated and detailed. Some books require more research. But I would say, sketches, doing the sketches and laying the book out visually in pencil and how the story is going to split up. I mean, the art director will give me an idea sometimes of how they'd like to see the break in the pages, but I like to just do it on my own, and because I'm envisioning the story as I read it, and I'm a stickler for pacing things right visually, and making something really pop as you turn the page as opposed to being quiet or whatever. So it's a lot of time in the sketch stage for me, and the design, what I call the design stage. And so I would say the design stage maybe takes 3 or 4 months, and the actual paintings take at least 5, maybe 6 months, and that's never enough time. I'm always rushing and not getting sleep on that last month.
It seems like a lifetime of work in one book, especially now that we're starting to kind of unearth like all of the process. Mary, you said something about visual pacing. Could you expand that a little bit more? Because that's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm thinking about how a story unfolds visually, I kind of think of myself as a movie director. I'm sitting in a chair, and you know how they have those chairs that move around, and they look down and get a bird's eye view at sometimes, or they're down and they're looking up. So I picture myself kind of off to the side in the scene, quietly watching as things go on, and thinking about changing the perspective, thinking about, okay, the character was this size. I want him to get bigger and bigger. Now I want to see an emotional part of him in a close-up in his face. And so there's visual pacing that way, where we get different sizes and perspectives. Like, for instance, in the noisy paint box, oopies, I gotta do this. We're seeing quite a bit here. We're learning about him seeing the paint box, I think, for the first time. We're meeting his aunt. We are seeing the kinds of paintings she approves of in the background. So there's a lot going on. But what is important and really at the core of the story is the next page, where he is, oops, I'm sorry, this is backwards.
You got it.
Where he's hearing his paint box for the first time. And that's a very important part of the story. And so we wanted to get up close. We wanted to see his expression. We wanted to see those paints hiss. And and then let's see what happens on the next page. And then we pull back, and we're focusing on all that color and all that hissing. So it's really, going along visually with the character, and as if you're there, as if you're experiencing it the way they are. And getting those quiet moments really quiet, and getting those emotional things really close up, and pulling back and seeing, a landscape if you need to see, somebody in the world or whatever. But I mean, really thinking about what that character's going through and trying to show it the best way.
I just saw a comment from BJ Russell saying how kids would be intrigued by this. And, one thing that I know educators are being asked to do is, especially art teachers, art educators, is to show what's possible when you have an art education. What are the careers that you can take? And that's one thing that we started to do with Deep Space Sparkle. What does it take to be a graphic designer? What does it take to be a children's book illustrator? And I'm going to change that PDF up a little bit because I know more now. But it'd be really cool to have those like insights into what it takes and what you're talking about, Mary, these are things no one thinks about. Teachers don't, we just make so many assumptions. We open up this beautiful book and we're like, oh, like this is so gorgeous, but we don't realize how intentional every little thing is in these books. And I know with my limited exposure to writing, I know a little bit about the words, but look how soft this picture is, and just like, why did you position this on the left of the page? You know, this art.
Because of what was on the previous page. It really has to flow like a story, just like the words have to flow. It has to connect from spread to spread. There shouldn't be a feeling that there's a pause. We just need to keep flowing. And
Mary, you create your all of your original arts on canvases, and then do some things get selected and some things don't, or how does that work?
The sketches is where the idea is approved.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So once they're approved, then I go to this is illustration board, actually, and I think all of Barb's books I painted with acrylic and some collage. The Kandinsky book had quite a bit of collage in it. I really wanted to show that kind of Victorian, or that time period of wallpapers and the proper patterns, and contrast that with all of his abstraction later in the book. And so that was collaged in. But most of this is acrylic and on board. And it takes, just a piece like this, a painting like this probably takes about 2 weeks to do.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. And Barb, one thing that I didn't know about Monet until I read this book was that he had his little art studio on a boat. I mean, I knew he painted the the pond and the lily pads and everything, but I didn't know he had a boat. So I'm always amazed at how you can pluck out the most important things and put them in the book and focus on those, just like we talked about with Kandinsky. Can you talk a little bit about which ones with Mornings with Monet, like why did you choose that? Like the boat.
Again, okay, our teachers, I'm going to be really honest here. I don't personally love Monet as a human being all that much. I found him very difficult, like a very difficult person. And I really do always want to be honest when I'm writing. It's nonfiction in this case, and I really want to be honest with children. And if I was going to talk about his whole life, I was going to have to say, yeah, and that wasn't very nice, and that wasn't very good, and you don't want to be like that, kids. And and that just didn't. That's not a picture book. That's something else altogether. That's like a lecture or a something you might hear in Sunday school or something, but. And so I thought, well, what do I think is the coolest part of this? And the garden has been written about before. We also look at this, like Mary was talking about visual pacing. I'm always looking at it as what other books are already out there, because he's a very, and the lily pads have been done in some way, and the garden has been done. And I'm like, what else about Monet? And I just kept coming back to the boat. I thought it was fascinating every time. And so a lot of times when the initial idea that draws me to a subject is what kids will find most fascinating. It sometimes just comes out that way. I kept going, but what about the boat? And people kept going, we don't know that much about the boat. And I'm like, there's got to be research somewhere about the boat, And then when I found a tiny little article that was originally in French from the 1800s, that a reporter had gone to Monet's studio and spent the entire day with him. That basically, the Mornings with Monet is, a souped up version of the day that reporter spent with Monet. That's what it is. So someone actually was there and saw all of his entire process for a day, went out on the boat with him and saw what he did. So I thought the process of that, he actually even switched paintings. Like Mary can talk about that more. I didn't even understand how someone would even think like that, but it's true that he, every time the light changed, he had a different canvas that he was working on that matched, the sun as it rose in the morning.
Yeah, and there were all these unfinished paintings on the boat, right?
Yeah.
And he had them a little slotted storage unit where he'd keep the paintings on the boat. So that boat was full. That probably had to walk sideways through the inside of that thing just to get through. And I don't know how he did what he did on that boat. And I didn't know until Barb wrote about this that he would, take these half finished paintings out and match them to the time of the day and continue on them. And, very methodical actually about it. As far as loose as his painting was, he was very thoughtful and methodical about how he was portraying the light and a certain time of day just to perfection. So
when it goes towards practice, it's all practice. Even very talented people work really hard. Sometimes I think, people tend to say when I was young, I was not a visual artist, so it was almost like I'm not talented in that. I would tell myself, I'm not, you don't have that talent. And I probably don't, but at some point it's more work than talent. The work is much more important.
I don't even like that word talent.
I know. I don't either. I agree with you. I don't either.
Do a book about that. Yeah.
Okay, I'll do that tomorrow.
No, it really is about hard work, and it's about caring about it and having some compassion about something too. I think that's where it starts. So.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. And that's a message that it's nice to give children too, that things aren't instant. And your path is never straight, and you got to follow what really interests you, which leads me to something else before we, Erica's going to come on soon, but I like to talk. We've just had such an amazing conversation about your process. I mean, I could probably stay on for like another day and just, bring out the wine and just really get into it. But there is a point where it sounds like your focus. Oh, she's here. I just have to ask you one thing, Mary. How important is it for you to create other things so that you can be the best illustrator? Because as I was looking at your Instagram, I not only noticed that you do beautiful abstract art, but you also had like the sock monkey phase going, which I thought was so fun. It's such a diversion. It's fun. And there was just this wonderful side.
Yeah.
That seems to.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, I think it's really important to, as an artist and as a writer too, I'm sure, is to expand yourself as much as you can and be as diverse as you can in your creating, because everything you create will make the other thing that you create better. Yeah. And actually the sock monkeys came about because of the pandemic. And I couldn't actually concentrate very much in the studio. It was the pandemic was causing me a lot of anxiety in the beginning. We were isolating at home, and I needed some other way to release, to deal with my anxiety. And we had just had a grandchild, and the other grandmothers were making quilts. I'm not a quilter, so I was trying to come up with something that I could make for my grandchild. I remembered my mom used to make sock monkeys back in the 50s, and I thought, well, maybe I could make a sock monkey. So I got a sock. I looked online to find out how to make a sock monkey, and I found that making these sock monkeys, it was growing, and they were getting bigger and bigger and more ornate, and they were becoming these characters, like my illustrated characters. And I started feeling better, and it was a way for me to deal with anxiety. I would still then find a way to get into the studio and paint. But then the monkeys became a way for me to give back with charity auctions, and that was great for Feeding America. But
wonderful.
Yeah, so I mean, everything that you create and that you can do that's new is going to make you a better artist, a better writer, a better anything, because you're expanding.
Yeah.
Important.
And I think everyone's creative. Like everyone's an artist in a lot of ways. I mean, I really think that that's true. People tend to think like they put too many, kind of fences around that word, art and artist and creativity. It's not a switch. It's not an on or off switch. It's like breathing.
Right.
And, you just, gardening is part of it. And, everything's part of it. Everything's part of it. at some point.
And I can't think of a better way to kind of end this chat. I'm going to go look at every single word and art, a piece of art in the books a little bit more carefully now. So Erica, thanks for coming back on. I know there's been some great questions, and I think Erica is going to pluck some questions and we can answer them.
Excellent. It was such a wonderful conversation, and there have been so many comments in the chat, and I don't know if you have been able to see them, but just how enlightening this conversation has been for a writer who loves painting with words. And there have been ideas that have come up. One educator said that she would love to have her students create a character, I think what she's saying is in the style of different artists after reading the books, to see what they come up with. How much your perseverance, both of you, has paid off in these books. And then there were questions that I'm sure will continue to come in, but questions that we got in advance. And the one that I received that I think would be really helpful to speak to, because we haven't touched on it yet, is Mary and Barb and Patty, well, I'll start with Mary and Barb, how you have connected with educators through your work and how you've connected with students directly with the books. And what you have seen has been most successful at bridging that gap between the book and the students.
Barb, do you want to start with?
Sure. I visit a lot of schools, at least pre the last year. I was in a lot of schools, and one of the things that I really appreciate, it's more what, I mean, I don't know that I do anything to make this happen. It seems like to me that the educators and the students, that's the collaboration. But when you walk down a hallway and you see a different Kandinsky painting created by the children on every door in a hallway, and the music teacher has been involved by also adding modern orchestral music, the kind of thing that Kandinsky was listening to when he was painting. So the kids are all familiar with some of the experimental music. And then the science teachers are talking about the senses and how people can have synesthesia, and that we don't just have 5 senses. You know, when I see all those interconnections, I'm just blown away by what educators do. Mm-hmm. And the kids are just, the kids can have, I'm sorry about the dog, sorry. The sound of a dog barking, which I didn't write into the book at all. I guess it's not so much I get more inspiration in a school than I feel like I've ever given. Just because what I've seen people take, one project and just run with it. Mm-hmm. What about you, Mary?
I visited a few schools and also some art schools. So I kind of, when I talk about my work with the books, I really like when I'm with younger kids, I like to bring supplies with me and, bring some art with me and demonstrate a little bit and refer to the book or the artist on how they might have painted a reflection or how they might have painted a tree, and different ways to think about how to express yourself visually with different kinds of art materials. And I know a lot of the schools are limited on their kinds of art supplies. And so that's, pretty hard. But if we can stick with just, talk about color and talk about shapes and the basics of art and how when we go out in the world, it's about how we see things as much as it is how we draw them. Mm-hmm. And so I like to do a little demonstration with my art and get the kids involved with actually creating art when we're talking about a book about an artist. And then if I'm going to an art school or something, it's really more about the process as an illustrator, because you'll be talking to a lot of, kids who are also trying to get into the business. And we talk about rejection and all kinds of things and contracts, business things too. So I really kind of, when I get involved with teachers or instructors or schools, I kind of have to look at the age level of who I'm talking to and kind of do it that way.
And Patty, as an art educator and as a in-classroom teacher that you've done both, are there approaches? Are there teacher guides? Are there resources that you have found the most helpful that bookmakers have created or supplied, or publishers have created or supplied, that you have found like, oh, this is the act, because teachers there's so much to do as a teacher. And, we all know that I remember as a teacher, I would grab anything extra that I could to help me with my craft as an educator. But as an art teacher, what is the most useful when it comes to bringing books into the classroom?
The books itself are the most useful. So, and to expand what artists' biographies you do wish to tell. We need more diversity in our nonfiction selection of artist stories. We need more women. We need the books first and foremost, and a lot it depends on the art instructor. But for art educators in a school, one thing that publishers could really assist with is vocabulary. Making beautiful vocabulary, like what words does the author use to tell the story. So oftentimes art educators will have a word wall whenever there's a new element of art that's being introduced, or a new word. Abstract art is something, that would be in a word wall. And it just helps build the vocabulary of the books as the year progresses. And another thing that art educators, they just can't teach art for the sake of teaching art. There are a lot of standards. So things like how does the author, or how does the illustrator rather, Mary, how does she use the elements of art and principles of design in this book? And then teachers can extract that and point it out as they're reading the book, or even have a discussion point. I know that those are the two big things that we do in my membership for teachers, that we really try to support them on those printables, but publishers could do this so beautifully and effortlessly. I mean, that would be a huge start.
Is there there's a national art education standards?
Yeah, there's a lot of mouthful standard things that teachers have to, it's like they have to put it on their wall. They have to they have to give a reason essentially to teach art, which
is it different state by state?
Well, yes, each state has various levels of standards, but there is a governing body, the National Art Association, which provides most districts with a really good comprehensive approach to art. And it does involve the things that Mary's talking about, is how do children take a work of art from Van Gogh, and how do they connect it to their lives? And Mary's talking about how she tries to connect the visuals with children so they can understand. And Barb writes the words that children can connect to, and feeling bored at the dinner table. And children have to see themselves in books, and that's all of the connecting standard that all educators are required to bridge the gap. You just don't, read a story and then create a piece of art. It has to connect in these really, actually, I think I know you may not believe it, but I actually think the standards are good, because it gives a framework for what an art educator can pull from a lesson and pull from a book and kind of narrow it down. Otherwise, you're kind of just, what do I do? So provides a framework.
No, that makes sense. I never felt that way as a teacher, but I see it now. When you're in the thick of it, it can be overwhelming. I'm going to drag in a question here from Natalie. How would you encourage word choice to students? What resources do you use?
Well, I guess that's my question, right? I will tell you that I kind of had to develop my own little thing that of course I don't have it here. It would be on my website. It's called a word bank. This is how I work. I know word banks in school, pretend it's not that, because I just didn't know what else to call it. Once I know what I'm writing about, I will kind of use an online thesaurus like rhymezone.com. And like for Kandinsky, I had a page of sound words before I was ever writing a story. I had pages of color words, pages of words that went with the history of the times. And then that way, when I'm actually going to sit down to write, I kind of feel like it primes my brain to have some of those word choices that you're talking about. It's just a way of, just kind of priming the pump, or having, thinking about the connections. You'd be surprised how many color words also had a sound component to them, which I never realized before, but then I obviously used a lot of those. So, Natalie, I would say that having kids make a bank, like having students have a set of words that they might use in the story ahead of time, is a really helpful writing tool for young kids. And actually, even authors.
That's brilliant.
Mm-hmm. I also want to pull this, and just there's so many comments here. I want to make sure that Mary and Barb get to see them. Thank you so much. You've absolutely revealed a wonderful part of the creative process for authors and artists. I so agree that there's an artist creating part in everyone. This is sometimes challenging to convince the students of this concept.
Mm-hmm. It is.
Such
because I was one of those kids. I keep the illustration that I did. It's like a hula girl, and it's a very typical 7-year-old illustration. And then my art teacher at the time, Catholic school, told me it was terrible, that I wasn't creative, and it was terrible. And I keep it right there, because it's kind of like, oh yeah, I'm creative in a different way. It's okay. You don't know what you're talking about. So I don't think, like, I know that you're a really great teacher, whoever just made that comment, but it's sad to me that kids already need to be convinced of that, because, when you start to do it for a living, you realize that it's everywhere and everyone has sparks of it. Mm-hmm. And kids especially, oh my goodness, they're like they're the font of all creativity.
I'm trying to get back to being a kid in my
right,
art.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Truly, I am.
Right.
When my boys were little and they were using these these crayons, and they were, little, like they're 8 and 10. So they were even younger, and they would it was just like color explosion on the page. I remember just hanging them up and being like, I could look at this all day. That total naivety and innocence, and there's no worry, and that's, Mary, I did have an illustrator talking with me earlier, saying, how do you not get in your own head about bookmaking? How do you deal with that?
It's tough. As an artist, and you're trying to be your own artist. You're also trying to illustrate somebody else's story, but still be yourself. It's tough, and that's why it takes a while, and that's why you draw and redraw, and that's why you put it away and come back the next day and go, oh, this is not good, and then you start over, and you give it time to cook and time to just develop. It just takes time and patience and practice, like Barb was saying.
Yeah. Every day, I had someone told me, and I can't remember who it is off the top of my head, that every night when they're done writing, they either are convinced they're a genius or that they're never going to write the next day. And then you wake up in the morning and it switches. Whichever one, if you were a genius, you wake up in the morning and go, oh yeah, no, I'm not a genius. Or if you went to bed thinking, oh, I'm terrible at this, you wake up the next morning, you're actually surprised it's pretty good. And so I just think it's being able at some point to spend enough time with it, like Mary says, that you realize that it's neither, the absolute best thing that you've ever seen in your whole life, or, it's as good as you can do, and it's authentic to yourself.
And then you have to let it go.
Right. And that's when you let it go. Mm-hmm. It's authentic. It says what I needed to say. It looks the way Mary needed it to look, or whatever. And that's the point.
And nothing is ever going to be perfect. So
right.
Never strive for perfection.
No, perfection will kill you. That's the bad one.
No.
Yeah. Because there isn't such a thing, No. And the people that I really admire, that I think whose work is perfect, they don't think their work is perfect. So
and other things in life, in math maybe, or, sciences. But I think in art, creating, writing, music, whatever, perfection is not a word. It just doesn't exist.
Yeah, which makes it hard to be graded on it and things like that you do in school. You know what I mean? Like, I think, I guess we're sort of graded too in a way, but not the same way anymore.
Yeah.
I wonder about that in school, Patty, about, you know what I mean? Of like of actually having, you know, a child's art judge. Do they still do that? Is it still
Hopefully
like
not.
against each
I
other?
don't think it's a thing. I know when you get into junior high and high school, when you're learning the principles of art and you're learning about different things, yes, you absolutely can be evaluated on it. But I think for children, especially the children that we're trying to reach, there is a measure of success, and I call that just the personal satisfaction. And the children don't have to say a word. You see it. You see them light up. You see their shoulders relax. You see their little tongues hanging out of their mouths when they're scribbling and painting. You can see viscerally when children are in that zone of creating, and you know that that was successful for them, because success is satisfaction and contentment in a child. And that's what I see. And of course, when you're around kids who exhibit that, it's the most beautiful thing in terms of, as an educator. I think that's why we all teach. Everyone who's here, all you art teachers out there, that's what we live for. That's what we want. It's just that contentment and that feeling of empowerment from a child of what they're creating this is good. Like, they like it. They're feeling it. Children aren't shy about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So excuse my puppy in the background. There are a few variations on this question, whether or not there's something in the works new. And I know that there might not be something in the works right now, though there is something in the works for both of you, lots of stuff in the works. And so you can talk about the kind of work that you're doing now. I think people would really like to hear about that.
Well, I'm actually doing abstract painting, and so I'm on this path of exploration. I'm just really trying to find out what other kind of artist I am, and it's very interesting going from illustrating to abstraction. And I'm stretching and I'm growing, and I'm one of those little kids now with my tongue hanging out and feeling that excitement. I love illustration. I appreciate good illustration, and I have a place for it in my heart. But I'm actually stretching other muscles here and just really trying to see what else I can do with painting, and maybe some monkeys along the way. I don't know. Yeah.
And the path got curvy again.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I said the path got curvy again.
It always is curving.
I'm too bored
What
with
makes
this
the path interesting? Who wants to walk on a straight path?
Mm.
You always know where you're at. You can always see too far ahead when you're on a straight path. It's okay.
Yeah. I need challenges, and I need things to change, or I'm not happy.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's true. I'm working on a couple of picture books, not with Mary, unfortunately, or fortunately, or whatever. It just is the way that the business works sometimes. But I too have decided to stretch, and I think I'm doing a middle grade book. So it's a lot of words and no illustrations, and I might be really nervous, but that's what it's about, right? Is stretching. So, yeah, there's something that I'm really interested in. And so I'm going to pursue it and see if I can write more than 1,000 words at a time. We'll see. I don't know.
I think you can do it.
I think so. Well, you
Definitely. You can definitely do it.
We'll figure it out. What about you, Patty? What are you doing? What's your you have any new ventures?
Well, there is always something new, because new is exciting. And I love a curvy path, and I love seeing what's ahead, and how we can take control of what's ahead by just putting one foot in front of another and just discovering what we can do. And I'm all about exploration. And we continue to grow our teacher membership. We just started an art membership for children. I get to be the teacher again. And that is like, it's kind of like it's my dessert after a long day. You know, I get to teach children. So that's exciting. And we're venturing into all sorts of other different things, art supplies, and maybe a retail store. I don't know. Like, I just go, bring it on. Like, what's next? Like, let's just do this and have some fun, because the world of children's art is incredibly energizing, and the supporting teachers who get to teach children are my favorite people in the world. So I just want to bring more happiness to more children through art making. And you guys have been a big part of it, because books paved the way for all sorts of creative thinking. And it's one big happy circle. Books and art, there's nothing better.
Well, I want to be mindful. I want to be mindful of all of your time. We are just a little bit past 8, and I'm sure that you have families and food and all sorts of the work that you need to get back to. So I will take, unless anybody wants to say a last word, I will take this moment to say thank you so much, Mary and Barb and Patty, for joining us tonight and for being able to not only shine a light on your body of work, Mary and Barb, together, which is so impressive and so beautiful. Snickers fully agrees.
So does Nikki with dog issues now. But like, also enough, I need to go.
But also on the importance and relevance of these books in the classroom, and what an incredible tool they are, and not just that, but how this conversation has also shed light on the importance of the art classroom in general. Mm-hmm. And how they are a place for safe haven and a place to explore and play and experiment and discover yourself, and to learn to do that through studying artists and their lives is, just to be able to have this conversation about that right now, when, it feels like there's too much of a movement away from the art room. Mm-hmm. And to be able to recenter it and to recenter the work that you are all doing, it feels like a very special occasion. And so I'm very grateful to you for taking the time to do that tonight. I'm very grateful for all the art educators and bookmakers who are on this call with us.
Yay, art
and who are listening in, for continuing to do the work that you're doing. So
yeah. I love my art teachers. I still think of them. They're my mentors. I don't know where I would be without them. They're so important. So important. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. And if you're new to Stimula Live, if you came just for Mary and Barb and Patty, I will say that we have a YouTube channel, Stimula Live on YouTube, where you can see tons of amazing content about all types of books for children, as well as content for educators and for aspiring bookmakers and published bookmakers. And if you go to stimulalive.com, you can see the entire series of all the events that we have done, some which are directed toward teachers directly and their parents, and many which are directed toward the children themselves. So they can do those story times and they can do those demonstrations. You have a wealth of material, including from Mary and Barb themselves, on that channel. So please check us out and join us again. And thank you so much for being with us this evening. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Be well.